Okay, in this video, I'm going to go over some crypto and business offshore examples for you guys to illustrate how this can all be tied together. I'm going to highlight some 100% by the book ones, some common ones that people think are tax-free, but actually not, and some loopholes. Okay, before we get into that, I just need to go over a couple of more advanced terms relating to tax that are going to come up in the examples. So the first is management rules. This is where the company is deemed to be managed from. Countries can decide to tax your company even if you have an offshore company, but you manage it from that country. This is why everyone in your home country doesn't have a 0% tax company, but still live there. They set up a local company that pays tax. Now, we covered this in Tax 101, but it's worth saying again. People who run online businesses often make this mistake. They assume that because they do their work online, this rule doesn't apply to them. If they're from the UK or any other country, and they set up a company in Dubai, but they're the only shareholder and director, and they run the company and they make all the decisions and they continue to live full-time in the UK or their home country, they don't get to pay 0% taxes. The Dubai company should pay tax in the UK and they should pay personal tax in the UK too. And just because you keep the money in a foreign bank account does not avoid this, okay? The next is CFC rules. So these are rules that are put in place to stop you being a personal tax resident of a high country and then having an offshore company that holds all your profits but pays you a minimal salary or doesn't pay you out the profits. So an example here, let's say you live in Australia and you set up a company in Hong Kong. You're a shareholder and you have partners or friends or whatever that carry out the day-to-day. All of the profits sit in Hong Kong, but they never get distributed to you because you don't have to pay personal tax on them. Under CFC rules, the Australian tax authorities can tax you on all of those undistributed profits you're entitled to as if they have been paid out to you. And this is so often why, in order to take advantage of offshore setups, you need to move country to change your personal tax residency to take advantage of these setups. Okay, so let's get into the examples. Example one is Dubai full-time. So Joe is from the UK. He decides to relocate to Dubai and live there full-time. His company pays 9% corporate tax on profits over 100K. Yes, that's right. Dubai have introduced a corporation tax. It's no longer 0% corporate tax. There are no personal or capital gains taxes in Dubai, so he takes a high salary from his company to reduce his taxable profit. He goes through the steps to leave the UK as a tax resident, and he only spends minimal time there every year. By setting up in Dubai, he gets a residence permit that allows him to live full-time in Dubai. He gets a local ID card that allows him to open up a personal bank account and crypto accounts so he can invest and cash out of crypto at the end of the bull run. He pays 0% tax on the crypto as Dubai is 0% capital gains. His new tax residency is in Dubai versus the UK because he spends most of the year there. Okay, that was example one, Dubai. Let's look at another example, Malta full-time. So Pedro, he's from Portugal. He decides to relocate to Malta and live there full-time. Now, his company pays an effective 5% corporate tax rate because he uses an offshore holding company structure. Malta has a unique taxation system called remittance-based taxation system for non-domiciled residents. Now, what that means is if you're not from Malta originally, you weren't born there, and you come there and become a tax resident, you're what's called a non-domiciled tax resident because you're a tax resident there, but your permanent home, your domicile, where you grew up, wasn't from Malta. And so you're only taxed personally on the money you bring into your local Maltese bank account, meaning money you keep in offshore personal bank accounts doesn't get taxed. Okay, so Pedro pays himself a small but reasonable salary in Malta, which gets taxed. That's for his permits, etc. But most of the profits end up in an offshore holding company and can be paid out tax-free as dividends to a non-Maltese bank account. He goes through the steps to leave Portugal as a tax resident, and he only spends minimal time there per year. He gets a local ID card that allows him to open up personal bank accounts and crypto exchange accounts so he can invest and cash out of crypto at the end of the bull run. He pays 0% tax on crypto because Malta does not tax crypto. And his new tax residency is in Malta because he spends most of the year there. Now, this is similar to the first example. We've just sort of switched Dubai with Malta. it's essentially the same for any low business tax and no crypto tax possibilities like the Cayman Islands. If you want to live there full time, you just set up a company, move there full time, set up your personal banking and exchange accounts, and then you benefit from the low or no taxes. Okay, so for the rest of examples, we're going to look at if you don't live somewhere full time and spending a reduced amount of days in a country. Okay, so Dubai, 90 days. Jordan is from Canada. He decides to relocate to Dubai and live there part-time. His company pays 9% corporate tax on profits over 100K. And these are basically the same as example one. So there's no personal or capital gains taxes in Dubai, so he takes a high salary. Now, Canada has an exit tax, so he does some careful tax planning to ensure he optimizes the amount of tax he pays on his exit. He files his exit tax return. He leaves Canada as a tax resident and spends minimal time there per year. Now, just in example one, you get a local residence permit that allows you to open up personal bank accounts and crypto exchange accounts. He pays 0% tax on the crypto as Dubai has 0% capital gains tax. Now, he has domestic tax residency in Dubai because he spends 90 days there per year. That's the minimum requirement to get tax residency in Dubai. He spends the rest of the year traveling between countries, not spending more than 3 months in each to avoid getting a second tax residency. So 90 days in Dubai, 90 days in Bali, 90 days in, Portugal, 90 days in Mexico, something like that. Okay, now let's look at Cyprus, 60 days. This is basically the equivalent of the example 3 we just went through, but in Cyprus. So Stein, he's from Germany. He decides to relocate to Cyprus and live there part-time. His company pays 12.5% corporate tax on profits. Now, Cyprus offers a 17-year exemption from tax for non-domiciled tax residents, which is similar to Malta, which means you're not from there originally, but you're meeting the requirement to be a tax resident there, which means that Stein will pay 0% on his dividends or any personal income. Now, Germany has an exit tax, so Stein also does some careful tax planning to ensure he optimizes the amount of tax he pays on exit. By moving to Cyprus, he actually avoids paying exit taxes altogether, versus if he moved to Dubai, he'd still have to pay them. So he leaves Germany as a tax resident and only spends minimal time there per year. Now, as I've mentioned in previous videos, Cyprus doesn't have a great reputation as being a safe place to keep your money in a bank. So Stein sets up personal accounts and crypto exchange accounts overseas to invest and cash out of crypto at the end of the bull run. He pays 0% tax on crypto, as Cyprus is 0% crypto tax. He has tax residency in Cyprus because he spends 60 days there a year and has a company there, and that's the minimum requirement to get tax residency in Cyprus if you're not from there. Now, he spends the rest of the year traveling between countries, just like in the Dubai example, not spending more than 3 months in each to avoid getting a second tax residency. Now, in Cyprus, if you do get a second tax residency, you lose the one in Cyprus on the 60-day rule. So it's very important not to get a second tax residency for this Cyprus example. Okay, now let's look at Dubai spending 2 days there a year. Now, many of you may have heard of Dubai, and you may have heard of different requirements to stay there. 6 months, 90 days, 2 days a year, or 1 day every 6 months. What's the difference? So 6 months in Dubai gets you tax residency that allows you to claim treaty benefits with other countries, meaning different countries have different tax treaties, which means if you're a tax resident of both countries, you can use the treaty to determine the correct amount of tax if both countries want to tax you. That's generally only really necessary if you're a tax resident in multiple countries. 90 days gives you domestic tax resident, meaning Dubai considers you a tax resident, but you don't get to claim the treaty benefits. And then 2 days per year, or 1 day every 6 months is the minimum you need to spend in Dubai if you have a company to maintain the company and your residency permit. Okay, so Frodo, he's from New Zealand. He decides to relocate his business to Dubai, but he doesn't want to spend any time there. As with the other examples, his company pays 9% corporate tax. There's no personal or capital gains taxes in Dubai. He goes through the steps to leave New Zealand as a tax resident and only spends minimal time there per year. By setting up in Dubai, he gets the residence permit that allows him to set up bank accounts and crypto exchange accounts. He pays 0% tax on crypto as Dubai has 0% capital gains. And he spends 1 day every 6 months in Dubai in order to maintain his residency permit and keep the company open. But he does not have tax residency in Dubai. He spends the rest of the year traveling between countries, not spending more than 3 months in each to avoid getting a tax residency. So compared to the other Dubai example of spending 90 days there a year, he's only spending 2 days. So because he's left New Zealand as a tax resident, and because he doesn't spend the 90 days in Dubai to get tax residency there, he doesn't have a tax residency. And this is a slightly higher risk strategy. It is a legal loophole, but governments and financial institutions expect you to have a tax residency. When you're filling in forms to open up a bank account or take out a mortgage or something, there's usually not an option of no tax residency. Now, you can usually just put Dubai because people expect you to pay no tax anyway, but depending on the amount of money you make and which country you're leaving, it might not be appropriate for you to have no tax residency. It's also somewhat dependent on your own risk tolerance, but just be aware that this is slightly higher risk than spending, say, 90 days in Dubai. Okay, let's look at another example. So let's look at now setting up a Hong Kong business and then being a bit of a nomad. So Liam, he's from Ireland. He decides to relocate his business to Hong Kong, but he doesn't want to spend any time there. Now, his company pays 0% corporate tax on the basis in Hong Kong, on the basis that there's no Hong Kong source income. Now, what does that mean? No Hong Kong clients, and that the business isn't operated from Hong Kong. So as Liam isn't going to spend any time in Hong Kong, he's not going to be a personal tax resident there. And so he doesn't need to worry about what the personal or capital gains tax rates are. So he goes through the steps to leave Ireland as a tax resident, and he only spends minimal time there per year. By setting up a Hong Kong company, he doesn't automatically get a residence permit or personal banking. It is possible to add that on when you're setting up in Hong Kong, but Liam needs to decide whether he wants the Hong Kong personal banking and crypto exchanges or whether he's going to do that elsewhere. Now, Hong Kong has 0% tax on gains for crypto investments, but Liam won't be a tax resident of Hong Kong because he's not spending any time there, so it's irrelevant. He spends the year traveling between countries, not spending more than 3 months in each to avoid getting a tax residency. So this is somewhat similar to the Dubai example last time, where he set up an offshore structure, he's not going to manage it from that country, and then he's going to not spend enough time in any one country to get a tax residency. And so, as I said before, this can be a slightly higher risk strategy. It is a legal loophole, but often governments don't like it. But just be aware that there's, Hong Kong is a business option in addition to Dubai. Okay, now let's look at the Hong Kong business, but living full-time in Costa Rica. So if you remember at the start of Tax 101, we looked at countries that have a territorial tax system. Costa Rica is one of those countries where they only tax foreign-sourced income. So let's look at this in an example. So we're going to take Liam from Ireland. He's setting up the Hong Kong business again. Same deal, 0% corporate tax on the basis there's no Hong Kong source income. Because he's not going to be spending any time in Hong Kong, the tax rates, personal tax rates and capital gains tax rates in Hong Kong are irrelevant. He goes through the steps to leave Ireland as a tax resident. As I said before, he doesn't get the residence permits automatically in Hong Kong, so he doesn't automatically get to set up a personal bank account. Hong Kong has 0% tax on crypto, but he won't be a tax resident of Hong Kong anyway, so it's irrelevant. He needs to look at where he's actually spending his time. And he's going to spend most of the year in Costa Rica and do a bit of traveling to other countries. Now, that means that his tax residency is going to be, his personal tax residency is going to be in Costa Rica. But let's look at this territorial tax thing. So Costa Rica is a territorial tax country, meaning that it doesn't tax foreign source income. But because Liam is the only director and shareholder of this Hong Kong company, he's effectively running that company from Costa Rica. So under management rules, that company's tax residency should actually be in Costa Rica. And so that no longer means it's foreign source income. Just because it's coming from an offshore company doesn't automatically mean it's foreign source because it's been generated in the country. So Liam should pay Costa Rican corporate tax on the Hong Kong company and personal tax